Hey, welcome back everybody to another Angular tutorial video. And if you've been following along, we've been going through the Angular Tour of Heroes tutorial found on Angular's website. And this is a good starting tutorial, I guess, for any beginners, anyone new wanting to learn Angular. At least it's what's recommended to most people. And I'm no expert at Angular yet by any means, though I hope to keep honing my skills, but I thought I'd go ahead and share what I've learned so far, and that's what we've been doing. So if you like this kind of stuff, don't forget to hit subscribe. And right now where we left off, we listed the heroes and used the ngIf Directive in our HTML to write out the list items for us. So each one of these is its own list item, if you remember, right here. And we say, let's go through all the heroes in our TypeScript file and our code behind, if you will, and let's display the ID in the name. And in this video, we're actually going to talk about click events. So if I click on something, you might be familiar with the click events in JavaScript. This is very similar. If I click on something in particular and I want it to do something, how do we get it to do that? So if I click, for example, on a hero, how do we get it to show its information? Maybe down here. And maybe we want to edit it too while we're at it. So I'll click on it. It'll bring up its name like we did in the earlier videos where I could edit the name inline and display its info that way. So that's the gist of what we're going to be doing in this video. And something else I want to talk about, and we'll get into it, is how to log in the console and how to view those, because maybe you're not familiar with that. And it's a good way to debug what's going on in your Angular application. So in Angular, if you want to have a click event, you will put in these two parentheses, open and close, the word click. And then you can say is equal to what function is going to be run whenever we click. So in our case, we don't have a function created yet in our TypeScript file. We just have the constructor and the on init, and we'll create that function here in a second. But let's say on selected, and you can actually pass in something too. And in our case, we're just going to pass in this hero. So as we loop through the heroes, and we'll set an event for each one saying if they click on that particular hero, we want to do something with that hero. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do in the HTML. And I went ahead and I saved, and you can see onSelected does not exist in the heroes component in the TypeScript file. It's like, well, you have this function now, but we don't know where that function is or where it's defined. So now we got to go ahead and define that function. So onSelected, and we're passing in a hero of type hero, and it's going to return nothing. And this is the syntax in TypeScript on how to create a function. So this is what's being returned by the function. Maybe we'll return an integer, or I guess a number, or a string, or a boolean, and this is where we define what's being passed in and the type of what's being passed in. And just to debug, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do console.log. And this is a nice JavaScript function where we can open up our console in our web browser and see whatever it is that we're telling ourselves with this console.log. In our case, let's just pass in hero and just make sure that when we click on the hero, we are getting the right hero back in the function, the one that we expect. So I'll go ahead and save again, and now it compiled successfully down below. I'll bring back my web browser, and you can hit F12 to bring up the console, and you can also inspect different elements of the HTML in here, but we want to hit the console tab, and this is where it'll write out to when we run into this console.log. And we can write a literal string too if we wanted to, saying hello or whatever we want, but in our case I just want to make sure the hero that the user is selecting is actually the one that shows up in the console. So if I click this Rubberman one, we should expect to see Rubberman show up in the console. And here it is. Hopefully it's zoomed in enough for you guys to see it. But you can expand this object and see the different properties. So ID 16 names Rubberman. That looks fine. That's exactly what we clicked. And if I continue to test, it looks like the ones that we clicked do show up in the console. So that's perfect. And that's a good way to debug what's going on in the TypeScript. So we're going to make another property, and I'm actually going to put it up here, and it's going to be called selected hero, and it's going to be of type hero. And right now we're not actually setting it at anything, so we're going to, at the very end of the name that we're giving it, we're going to put a question mark, meaning that it can be unassigned. And so now we're going to add this details section below our list. And as always, I'm going to link, this tutorial in the description. So if you are following along, you can copy the code as well. You can feel free to write it out, but save me some time at least copying this. And then we'll talk about what's going on, of course. But I'm just, I guess, lazy and going to copy and paste the code right down here. So what's happening? We have this selected hero being bound to this h2 right now, and we're throwing it through this pipe, making all of the characters in it uppercase. And we're going to say its details, and then we're going to show its ID and then its name. And then we're also putting an input tag below where we show the name, I guess, because this was just a label for the hero name. And it's going to not only hold the hero name, but we can alter the hero name if we want to, because it's in this input tag. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save, but it looks like this is going to error. And in fact, I know it does because I tried this before this video, and it does indeed error. And there's a reason for this. Even though in the TypeScript file, we set it as it can be unassigned, in the HTML, it's still trying to render, okay, give me the selected hero name and make it uppercase. But when we first start, there is no selected hero. We haven't actually selected a hero yet in the HTML. So how do we go about fixing this? Well, there's another directive, and don't forget this right here, this ngFor was a directive. There's another directive called ngIf. So we can write basically an if statement and say, if this is true, then we'll show this HTML. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say if selected hero exists, then display this HTML. That way, it's not trying to render with this bound property and it doesn't exist. So we're going to put a div, and then we're going to write the directive *ngIf. And then we're going to say that's going to be equal to if selected hero, which is a short way of saying if selected hero exists, display everything in this div, render this div. So we're going to copy everything there and paste it inside of this div. And now, like I said, if selected hero exists, then it'll render this. We'll hit save again, and if I scroll down, you can see it compiled now successfully. So let's bring this up and just see what's going on. You can see right now we don't have this input tag and all that stuff down here, that whole div, because, like I said, we haven't selected one yet. But when we do select one, watch at the bottom, well, nothing happens. And that's because in that TypeScript file, we actually didn't do what we should have done in this onSelected. What we're supposed to do is say this, meaning in this class, this dot selected hero is going to be equal to the hero that we click on. Now, if I go ahead and save it, if we click on one, we should see the details below, and there you go. And it might be worthwhile, you can do both. You can do console.log hero still. Maybe I shouldn't have removed that line. And not only can we look at it down here, but we can make sure the one we click on, like we have before, is the right one. And now notice that when I change this to that, this gets changed and this right here gets changed, because these are all bound to the same property, which is kind of cool. So now if I go to change it, yeah, all of these different ones change. And if I click on a different one, we see that one pop up down here with its details, and we can alter the name with those as well. So we learned a few things in this particular video. We learned the click event, how to write out a click event, how to create a function to handle that click event, how to debug with console.log, and also the ngIf directive, which means, if this condition is met, render this HTML. Pretty simple, but all pretty powerful. And hopefully this all makes sense. I don't know what we're doing in the next tutorial. What's up after this? It looks like the next thing we're going to do is when we select one, we change the CSS of that particular item. So stay tuned for that. We are at the end, or going near the end of part 2, and I'm assuming we'll also start part 3 in the next video as well. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this and getting something useful out of it, and I hope to see you next one.